The man who flew across the Atlantic was America's hero. But one night, in 1932, tragedy struck. His infant son was taken from his crib, and a ransom note was left behind. What followed was fear, betrayal, and a crime that would be called the trial of the century. You are living in America in the early 1930s. The Great Depression has cast a long shadow across the nation. Millions are out of work, bread lines stretch around the corners, and people look desperately for something to remind them that greatness still exists. That hope came in the form of a young aviator named Charles Lindbergh. Just a few years earlier, in 1927, he had accomplished the impossible, flying solo across the Atlantic Ocean from New York to Paris in his little plane. The spirit of St. Louis, he became a legend overnight. Newspapers called him the Lone Eagle. Crowds cheered his name. To the American public, Lindbergh wasn't just a pilot, he was a symbol of bravery, determination, and the bright future of aviation. When he married the daughter of the wealthy and influential Dwight Morrow, and the couple had a son, Charles Lindbergh, Jr., the baby was called the nation's child. Photographs of the blonde-haired infant appeared in magazines. People adored this family, and for a moment, in a time of hardship, they represented something pure and hopeful. But on the night of March 1st, 1932, that image was shattered forever. At the Lindbergh family's country home in Hopewell, New Jersey, the baby's nursemaid went to check on the toddler. What she found would send chills through the house. The crib was empty. The window was open. A crudely made wooden ladder had been left outside. On the windowsill, muddy footprints. And on the radiator, a chilling note. The ransom note demanded $50,000 in small bills for the safe return of the child. Charles Lindbergh rushed to the room, panic tearing through him. He had crossed the Atlantic alone, but now he faced a nightmare unlike anything he had ever imagined. His son, just 20 months old, had been kidnapped. The news spread like wildfire. Reporters swarmed the estate. Police blocked the roads, but it was too late. The crime had already captured the world's attention. It became more than a kidnapping. It became the crime of the century. The ransom note was clumsy, filled with misspellings and strange symbols. The kidnapper demanded that Lindbergh not involve the police too deeply, or else the baby would be harmed. More notes followed, each one increasing the pressure. But Lindbergh was no ordinary father. He had the nation watching, pleading with him, and even offering to pay the ransom. He enlisted help from an unlikely source, underworld figures, gangsters who claimed they could negotiate with the kidnappers. Even the infamous bootlegger Al Capone, imprisoned at the time, offered assistance if he could be released temporarily. Weeks passed. Negotiations dragged on. Lindbergh was desperate. Finally, an intermediary arranged a handoff. The ransom, $50,000 in gold certificates and marked bills, was delivered, and for a moment there was hope. But the child never came home. 72 days after the kidnapping, on May 12, 1932, a truck driver stumbled upon a small body in the woods not far from the Lindbergh estate. The body was badly decomposed. It was the baby Charles Jr. His skull was fractured, and investigators believed he had been killed the very night he was taken. The discovery sent shockwaves across America. People had prayed for a miracle, but instead they were left with grief and rage. The search for justice began. The nation was outraged. The most beloved baby in America had been brutally taken, and every citizen demanded justice. President Herbert Hoover himself ordered the FBI and all federal resources to aid in the investigation. But this was not an easy case. The Lindbergh estate was remote, surrounded by woods. There were no witnesses. The only real clues were the ransom notes, the ladder left behind, and the marked ransom money that had vanished into the criminal underworld. The ladder became a central piece of evidence. Hand-built, with unusual carpentry work, it was unlike anything mass-produced. Investigators concluded it had been crafted by someone with woodworking skills. Meanwhile, the ransom notes revealed a peculiar writing style, misspelled words, odd symbols, and broken English. Experts suspected the writer might be German or from a European background. For 2 years, the case seemed to go cold. The ransom money was out there, but rarely appeared. Then, in 1934, a break came. At a gas station in New York City, an attendant grew suspicious when a customer paid with a $10 gold certificate rare bill. The man had scribbled the car's license plate number on the bill before calling the police. That license plate led to a man named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Hauptmann was a 34-year-old German immigrant. He worked as a carpenter and had a criminal past. He'd once served time for armed robbery in Germany before fleeing to America. When police searched his home, they found $14,000 of the Lindbergh ransom money hidden in his garage. Investigators also noticed something chilling. The wood used in the ransom ladder matched wood found in Hauptmann's attic. To the public, it seemed like an open and shut case. The monster who had killed the Lindbergh baby had been caught. But there were doubts. Hauptmann insisted he was innocent. He claimed a former business partner named Isidor Fish, now deceased, had left the money with him before returning to Germany, and he had no knowledge of its origins. He said he was being framed. Yet the evidence mounted against him. The handwriting on the ransom notes was compared to his experts claimed it was a match. Witnesses said they had seen a man resembling Hauptmann lurking near the Lindbergh estate. And then there was the damning fact that part of the kidnap ladder had been constructed from a floorboard cut out of Hauptmann's own attic. The case became a national obsession. Newspapers called it the trial of the century. Reporters filled the courthouse in Flemington, New Jersey. Spectators lined up for hours to get seats inside. The trial wasn't just about Hauptmann. It was about the grief of Charles Lindbergh and the fury of an entire nation. Lindbergh himself took the stand, his voice steady, but his eyes filled with pain. As he described the night his son was taken, the jury listened in silence. The prosecution painted Hauptmann as a cold, greedy man who kidnapped and murdered a child for money. The defense argued he was the victim of circumstantial evidence and hysteria. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. On February 13, 1935, they returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts kidnapping and murder, Hauptmann was sentenced to death. Even then, appeals dragged on. His wife, Anna Hauptmann, pleaded for his life, insisting he was innocent. But the state was determined. On April 3, 1936, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was executed in the electric chair. As the switch was thrown, the world thought it had found closure. The Lindbergh case was over. Justice had been served. Or had it? Because even after Hauptmann's death, questions lingered. The conviction of Bruno Richard Hauptmann was supposed to end the nightmare. But almost immediately, cracks began to appear in the so-called airtight case. Historians, legal scholars, and even FBI officials later admitted that the investigation was far from perfect. Some even claimed it was deeply flawed. First, let's look at the ransom notes. Linguistic experts argued that while Hauptmann's handwriting was similar, it was not a perfect match. Several independent experts claimed that the state's analysis was biased, that they forced the similarities. Then came the ladder. Yes, the wood matched Hauptmann's attic boards, but the way police discovered the match raised eyebrows. Was it truly a forensic breakthrough? Or had investigators, desperate for answers, made the evidence fit their narrative? Even the eyewitnesses were shaky. Some, who had originally said they couldn't identify anyone, suddenly remembered seeing Hauptmann after his arrest. Was this genuine recognition or the power of suggestion? And then came the biggest controversy, the ransom money. Hauptmann claimed it wasn't his. He said it had been left with him by his business associate, Isidor Fisch. Fisch had returned to Germany and died, conveniently unable to confirm or deny Hauptmann's story. To skeptics, this seemed far too convenient for prosecutors. Fisch became a scapegoat who couldn't defend himself. But perhaps the most haunting mystery was this: did Bruno Hauptmann really kill the Lindbergh baby? Some conspiracy theories suggest he may not have acted alone or at all. One theory claims the Lindbergh household staff might have been involved. After all, they had access to the estate and could have passed information to outsiders. Another suggests that Charles Lindbergh himself, known for his obsession with discipline and strict parenting, may have accidentally caused his son's death and staged the kidnapping to cover it up. This theory remains controversial and is often dismissed, but it still lingers in dark corners of history. Others believe the mob was behind it. In the 1930s, organized crime had connections everywhere, and the Lindberghs were wealthy targets. Was the ransom an underworld operation that went tragically wrong? And what about the political angle? Some historians suggest the case was rushed because the nation needed a villain. Lindbergh was a hero, the baby was a symbol of American innocence, and the people demanded justice. In that kind of pressure cooker, could Hauptmann have been a convenient scapegoat? Even today, books and documentaries continue to question whether the right man was executed. Was Bruno Richard Hauptmann a ruthless child killer or a victim of one of the most sensational miscarriages of justice in American history? The truth may never be known. But one thing is certain: the Lindbergh baby kidnapping changed America forever. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping wasn't just another crime. It left scars that still shape America nearly a century later. 1. The birth of the crime of the century. The case marked the first time in U.S. history that a single criminal investigation dominated the headlines for years. Newspapers ran daily updates, photographers camped outside the Lindbergh home, and radio broadcasts carried every development into millions of American households. It was the birth of true crime as mass entertainment. The public followed the case like a tragic soap opera, and in many ways, It set the stage for the sensational media coverage of future trials from O.J. Simpson to Casey Anthony. 2. The Lindbergh law outrage over the kidnapping led directly to new federal legislation. Congress passed the Federal Kidnapping Act in 1932, nicknamed the Lindbergh Law, for the first time. Kidnapping became a federal crime if the victim was taken across state lines. The FBI could now step in, giving the federal government sweeping new powers to investigate. This law remains on the books today, and it all started with one baby stolen from his crib. 3. The rise of forensic science. The investigation highlighted the importance and limitations of forensic evidence. The latter would analysis, handwriting comparisons, and ransom money tracing were cutting edge for their time. But they also sparked controversy. Were they enough to convict a man and sentence him to death? This question inspired decades of improvement in crime labs, evidence handling, and courtroom standards. The Lindbergh case became a cautionary tale for forensic science. Proof must be airtight, not just convincing. 4. The cult of Lindbergh and its downfall. Charles Lindbergh, once America's golden boy, saw his reputation change forever. At first, he was the grieving father, a symbol of tragedy. But later in life, his political leanings, particularly his sympathy toward Nazi Germany before World War II, cast a dark shadow. Some even revisited the kidnapping case through this lens, wondering if his fame and influence had shielded the truth. 5. Lasting conspiracies. The doubts surrounding Bruno Hauptmann's guilt never fully died. Books, TV specials, and court appeals decades later kept the debate alive. Was he guilty beyond doubt? Or was he sacrificed to satisfy a nation's hunger for justice? That lingering uncertainty is part of why the case still fascinates us. Like the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, or Ramsey, it's one of those mysteries that refuses to fade. 6. A nation changed. Perhaps the greatest legacy is how the case transformed public trust. Parents across America grew more protective. Locked doors, guarded nurseries, and the fear of strangers became part of everyday life. The idea that it could happen to anyone, even America's most beloved family, haunted the national psyche. The kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh, Jr. wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a turning point where innocence slipped away and America realized the world could be darker, colder, and crueler than it ever imagined.